Modern started in 2011 when Wizards initially tried to keep Affinity for artifact decks in check with the initial banning of the 5 artifact lands. However, there was a zero-cost artifact that ran rampant in Modern from the time it was printed until it was eventually banned. It accelerated and helped to create 5 different decks that rose to power during different eras of Modern before it was eventually banned. I am, of course, talking about Mox Opal. The first 2 decks to utilize Mox Opal in Modern were Eggs and Affinity. The Egg deck used cards like Second Sunrise and Faith Reward to recast your 0 and 1 cost artifacts. Wizards stepped in when large tournaments known as Grand Prix had players taking 15 minutes on one turn, and they banned Second Sunrise in 2013. Now, the original Affinity list that was created played a unique game plan similar to Eggs in that they are able to dump its hand down through 0 and 1 cost artifacts, except they are prioritizing the creatures that cost 0 and 1. They would go wide and chip away at their opponent. This deck would do this through cards like Signal Pest, Steel Overseer, or Master of Ethereum. It also had the ability to pivot or shift gears to a pure style strategy using Cranial Plating or Arcbound Ravager to sacrifice all those 0 and 1 cost artifacts to make one creature really big, or of course one-shot you with Inkmoth Nexus. The original list shifted between adding red cards like Galvanic Blast or Shrapnel Blast to add a burn element, or they would add blue cards like Master of Ethereum or Thoughtcast. Sometimes they would even run both, utilizing Springleaf Drum and that Mox Opal to help with mana fixing. Affinity became so consistent in its game plan that the deck really stayed the same from its creation up until 2020. Even during Pro Tour Oath of the Gatewatch in 2016 at the start of Eldrazi Winter, Affinity was the only deck to secure 2 top 8 spots against the 6 Eldrazi. Things really started to change though in 2017 when we saw 2 new artifact decks start to pop up. The first new artifact deck, originally known as Snake Scales, which utilized Winding Constrictor and Hardened Scales to manipulate +1/+1 counters with creatures like Hangerback Walker, Walking Ballista, and Arcbound Ravager. By 2018, they had streamlined the deck into a green version of Affinity, dropping Winding Constrictor and utilizing Mox Opal to speed up the game plan. The second deck tried to create a similar game plan of Eggs. Cast a bunch of artifacts, generate mana, and eventually kill your opponent. The easiest way to do this during Modern at the time was to play KCI, or Cart Clan Ironworks. By sacrificing your low-cost artifacts like Chromatic Sphere or Star, you get to generate mana, draw cards, and eventually use Scrap Trawler or Mirror Retriever to continue to draw Sacrifice Engine. Over the next 2 years, KCI decks' consistent combo power would take over top 8 finishes at Grand Prix to the point where Wizards of the Coast steps in and bans KCI. Wizards went on to state that we're keeping an eye on 2 artifact-enabling cards, Ancient Stirrings, which is a staple in both Hardened Scales and Tron, and Mox Opal. At the time, they noted that Mox Opal was continuing to show up in high-profile decks like Hardened Scales, but also enables a variety of more fringe artifact synergy decks like Lantern Control. They ended the ban announcement with a statement on how they will continue to monitor the health of the meta and the strength of decks that use these cards. Which brings us into our final deck and the reason Mox Opal was banned. June 14, 2019, Modern Horizons 1 was released. This is one of the first sets that was designed to skip standard and go right into an external format of Modern. With this premise, Wizards could print more powerful cards to shake up the meta more than banning or unbanning cards had done in the past. Looking back, we know how powerful cards are always printed in Modern Horizons, and we could spend a whole episode breaking down how Hogak messed up Modern, but today we're focusing on artifact decks. That means we have to talk about Arkham's Astrolabe and Urza Lord High Artificer. At first, things didn't seem so bad. Yes, players were trying to slot these cards into the Whir of Invention deck to play the Sword of Meek Thopter Foundry combo so they could gain infinite life and make a million 1/1 Thopters to kill your opponent off the back of Urza's ability to tap an artifact and generate 1 blue mana, but everyone was trying to figure out how to break the new cards, and decks like Hogak were created. No, it wasn't until October when Throne of Eldraine was released and Oko Thief of Crowns came into the meta that things get really bad. Very few Planeswalkers make the cut as something good enough to see Modern play, especially in 2019. Oko's +2 ability to get a food token is just a mana rock when you have Urza out, or the +1 that can turn that food token or an enemy artifact or creature into a 3/3 elk with no abilities. Backed up by counterspells, the deck would just lock players out of the game. After 3 months of Urza and Oko dominance, Wizards is forced to ban more cards, and in January 2020, both Oko Thief of Crowns and Mox Opal are banned. According to Wizards of the Coast, Mox Opal has a long contributed to strategies that seek to end the game quickly and suddenly through explosive attacks, one-turn win combos, or locking out your opponent. Historically, Mox Opal has always been part of the decks that approach those problematic impacts on the metagame. Oh, remember that other artifact that was causing problems? Arkham's Astrolabe? It survived until July, before it was also banned. So that leaves us with the question, did any artifact deck survive the artifact purge of 2020? Yes and no. The consistent deck known as Affinity is unrecognizable in 2023. It still utilizes 0 and 1 cost artifacts, but instead of swinging in to end the game quickly, it builds up and trades resources. Now it's shifted to a control deck and looks more like Legacy 8 cast, utilizing Thought Monitor and Thought Cast with the help of Urza. Urza also went back to the traditional Sword of Meat combo decks, while Hardened Scales bounced back better than the rest after Mox Opal was banned. New cards have been printed for the deck, like Ozolith and the Ozolith Shattered Spire and Patchwork Automaton. It continues to do artifact sacrifice shenanigans using Arcbound Ravager like the old school Affinity decks, and relies much more on that Pierce strategy. Did you play during the days of old school Affinity or Eggs? What about KCI or Hardened Scales or even Urza? We've seen so many powerful decks rise up on the back of that 0 mana artifact known as Mox Opal, but I'm one to always push on bannings, but I don't even know if Mox Opal is safe in today's meta to be free. But leave a comment down below and let me know what you think about Mox Opal. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for tuning in and watching, guys. If you guys like the stuff, please spread the word, let people know, hit the subscribe buttons, all that kind of good stuff. But again, that's going to do it for us here. We'll see you guys next game.